The table was set for 14 people. There was roast chicken, fresh bread, and a fruit centerpiece that Lydia Voss had arranged herself and photographed twice before anyone sat down. It looked like a family that had everything figured out. I was the only one there who knew how much of it was built on borrowed money. Borrowed time. And borrowed from me specifically. My name is Seraphina Voss. I am 27 years old. I work 12-hour nursing shifts 3 days a week and home care visits on the other 2. I have never missed a bill. I have never asked this family for anything. And for as long as I can remember, that has been treated not as strength but as convenience. They called me the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who never makes a fuss. What they meant was, the one who won't fight back. They were wrong about that. They had been wrong about that for a long time. And on the Sunday my mother looked across a table of 14 people and called me a useless thing. My grandmother, who had been silent the entire meal, placed her teacup down. One soft click. And everything began. Sunday family dinner at the Voss family home. A large warm house that Seraphina has never felt warm inside. The chapter opens mid-meal. Noise, laughter, the performance of a happy family. Seraphina arrives last, straight from a home care shift. She still has the faint smell of antiseptic on her wrists. She changed in the car. Nobody notices she arrived late. Nobody saved her the seat nearest the window, the one she has sat in since childhood. Maybelle is in it, legs folded underneath her, laughing at something on her phone. Seraphina scans the table. Her father Harlan, cutting bread like a man with nothing on his conscience. Her mother Lydia, adjusting the centerpiece fruit that nobody will eat. Her Aunt Clara already refilling her wine. Her cousin Lorena, who catches Seraphina's eye and gives a small apologetic smile, the kind that says I know and I'm sorry and I don't know how to stop it. Seraphina sits at the only remaining chair, the one pressed against the wall, closest to the kitchen door. She has sat here before. She will not comment on it. Lydia, without looking up from her plate. Seraphina, you're late. We started without you. Seraphina. I had a shift. Lydia. You always have a shift. She said it the way someone mentions a bad habit. Description of Maybelle. Effortless, expensive, entirely at ease. She has not worked in 14 months. Seraphina knows this not because anyone told her, but because she noticed. The way she notices everything in this family while pretending not to. Lydia sets her fork down. The table doesn't go quiet immediately. It goes quiet in stages, the way a room does when someone clears their throat before delivering bad news. Seraphina, give Maybelle your bank card. She needs the deposit for the boutique lease. Friday is the deadline. Silence. Not alone, Maybelle added, without looking up from her wine glass. A gift. You barely spend on yourself anyway. A gift. Seraphina turned the word over. A gift was something given freely, from fullness, from wanting someone else to have something good. This was not a gift. This was an extraction dressed in ribbon. She thought about her bank balance. About the water heater in her apartment that had been making noise for 3 weeks. About the overtime she had worked last month specifically so she would have a cushion. A small private cushion that was hers and no one else's. Harlan, not looking at Seraphina. It's family, Sarah. We take care of each other. Seraphina quietly. Do we? Brief loaded pause. Harlan looks down at his bread. Winnie Voss has been at the far end of the table the entire time. She has eaten slowly. She has said nothing. She is 74 years old and she has the kind of stillness that belongs to people who have already decided something. She places her teacup down. One soft click. And every head turns. Before anyone passes anything, Winnie says without raising her voice, I'd like Seraphina to hear something first. Seraphina's heart rate changes. Not from fear, but from something she hasn't felt at this table in years. Recognition. Someone finally saw what was happening. Someone had been watching all along. She looked at her grandmother's hands. One of them was resting on a small, folded envelope that had not been on the table 5 minutes ago. The dinner table is no longer a dinner table. It is a courtroom and nobody asked for it to be one. Clara refills her wine but doesn't drink it. Emmett sets his fork down. Lorena pulls her chair half an inch closer to Seraphina's side, almost unconsciously, almost like loyalty. Seraphina describes watching her grandmother open the envelope with the same unhurried patience she uses for everything. There is no performance in Winnie Voss. There never has been. That is what makes her terrifying when she needs to be. Winnie unfolds the letter slowly and reads one line aloud. Harlan wrote this to me 6 weeks ago. He asked me to keep it private. She looks at Harlan. I kept it private until tonight. Harlan's face does something complicated. Not quite guilt. Not quite anger. The face of a man who gambled on silence and is watching his chips pulled back across the table. Seraphina watches her father and realizes she has spent 27 years reading his face like a weather forecast, trying to predict which version of him would show up, the soft one or the one who looked through her. Tonight, for the first time, he looks at her. Really looks. And what she sees in his eyes is not cruelty. It is worse than cruelty. It is shame that arrived too late to help anyone. Winnie slides a second folded paper across the table toward Seraphina. It is a printed bank statement. Seraphina's account. Annotated. I had your grandfather's lawyer pull these when your father contacted me, Winnie says. I wanted to understand the full picture before I said anything. Seraphina stares at the page. Numbers. Dates. Transfers. Each one small. Each one labeled. Together they add up to something that makes the room tilt slightly on its axis. Seraphina reads each transfer aloud not for drama, but because she needs to hear them to believe them. Maybelle's boutique research trip. Lydia's car service contract. Maybelle's apartment security deposit, the one she told everyone their grandmother paid. A family holiday in the mountains that Seraphina was told was cancelled due to cost. Spa weekend. 2 luxury restaurant bookings under Harlan's name. $31,000. 3 years. Never once asked. Lydia's voice controlled and cold. Those were temporary borrowings. You were never going to miss them. Seraphina looks at her mother for a long moment before answering. I worked a double shift to pay for my own appendix surgery, because I thought my emergency fund was gone. I thought I had miscounted. I cried in a hospital parking lot at midnight, Mom. Over my own money. That I earned. Complete silence. Maybelle quietly. I didn't know where Dad was getting it from. Lorena from across the table, almost a whisper. Maybelle. Stop. She had rehearsed this scene in her head before. Not this specific version, but some version of it. Some version where the truth came out and the room went quiet and her family finally understood what they had done. In every version she imagined, she cried. She did not cry now. She felt something colder and cleaner than crying. She felt certain. Winnie folds her hands on the table and says, simply, and that is not the worst of it. Nobody asks her to continue. Nobody has to. The room has already leaned forward. Seraphina describes the lakeside house the way someone describes a wound they got used to carrying. Lydia called it the family legacy. She mentioned it at every gathering, casually, like royalty mentioning a country estate. Maybelle had already started referring to it as her future home to friends. Seraphina had never once been invited to stay there. Winnie reaches into the cardigan pocket again. Another document. This one is older. The paper has that particular cream yellow tone of something that has been kept carefully for a very long time. Winnie places it at the center of the table and smooths it with one hand. Your grandfather Ephraim purchased this property in full 22 years ago. His will, the complete will, not the summary your father read at the kitchen table the week after the funeral, left this property in its entirety to Seraphina. Harlan. That will was amended. You know that. Winnie. No, Harlan. You told people it was amended. That is a different thing. Seraphina read the deed. Her name. Her full legal name, Seraphina Elaine Voss. In her grandfather's handwriting on the beneficiary line. Ephraim Voss, who smelled like cedar wood and old books, who used to press $20 bills into her palm when nobody was watching and say, for the quiet days, little bird. He had seen it. He had watched the same table she sat at every Sunday, and he had seen what nobody else admitted seeing. He had done something about it. Lydia standing now. That house is our family home. Mother, you cannot walk in here and… Winnie. I did not walk in here. I have been sitting at this table for 2 hours. You simply did not notice me until I became inconvenient. Clara sets her wine down for the first time. Emmett exhales through his nose. Lorena's hand moves slightly across the table, not touching Seraphina's but close. Maybelle voice shaking. Dad told me that house was going to be mine. He said Grandpa promised him. Seraphina quietly. He told me the trip was canceled because of cost. A beat. Then. He lied to both of us, Maybelle. The only difference is you never had to pay for it. She watched her sister's face crumble and felt something she didn't expect. Not satisfaction, not triumph. Sadness. Maybelle had been used to just differently. Kept comfortable, kept distracted, kept loyal through gifts and promises. It was a different kind of damage. No less real. Harlan pushes back from the table. His voice drops low and tight. There is more to this situation than you understand, Seraphina. That property has complications. Winnie's eyes find him across the table. Yes, she says. It does. And we are going to discuss every single one of them. There is a specific kind of silence that comes after something has gone too far to come back from. Seraphina had been in rooms with that silence before, hospital rooms mostly. She recognized it now in her mother's dining room. Nobody was eating anymore. The roast chicken had gone cold. Winnie reaches into her bag. Not her cardigan this time, her bag, which means she came prepared for exactly this depth of conversation, and places a third document on the table. This one has a paperclip and a sticky note in Rufus McGraw's handwriting. Winnie. 2 years ago, your father took a business loan of $85,000. He used the lakeside property as collateral. Harlan. The business needed capital. There was no other way. Winnie. There was one other way, Harlan. You could have asked. She would have said no. He said, so quietly that Seraphina almost didn't catch it. Yes, Winnie agreed. She would have. Seraphina stared at the loan document. Page 3. The consent signature line. Her name. Her handwriting. Except it wasn't. She had not signed this paper. She had never seen this paper. She knew her own signature the way she knew her own heartbeat. She had written it on patient charts and prescription forms and lease agreements more times than she could count. This was not hers. Seraphina very quietly. That is not my signature. Harlan. Seraphina. That is not my signature, Dad. The word Dad sat in the sentence like a stone. Emmett stands up from the table slowly, the way people stand when they have decided something. He walks to the window and stands with his back to the room. His silence is its own verdict. Clara has stopped pretending to be neutral. Her eyes are fixed on Harlan with an expression Seraphina has never seen on her aunt's face before. Something like recognition. Something like disgust. Lydia. He was protecting this family. He was trying to save what we built. Seraphina. He built it on my name. Without asking me. There was a moment right then where she could have fallen apart. Where the weight of all of it, the money, the property, the signature, the years of being managed and extracted from and dismissed, could have collapsed into something ugly. She felt it building. And then she looked at Winnie, who was watching her the way a lighthouse watches a ship. Steady, certain, unmoved by weather. And Seraphina breathed. Not yet. There was still more. Winnie's hand was still resting on her bag. Lorena, from across the table, voice steady despite everything. Uncle Harlan. You need to stop talking. Right now you need to stop talking. Harlan looks at his niece. Then at the table. Then at his hands. He stops talking. Winnie lifts the final document from her bag. This one is larger. Gold-bordered. The kind of document that was designed to look like what it is, permanent. Seraphina, she says. Your grandfather and I did something 12 years ago that we never told you about. We didn't tell you because we didn't want it to change how you moved through this family. She slides it across the table. We wanted you to keep being exactly who you are. And then when the time came, you would simply have the ground under your feet. The gold-bordered document sits in the middle of the table, and nobody reaches for it. It carries the weight of something that cannot be undone once read. Seraphina picks it up. Seraphina reads. The room waits. She reads slowly because her eyes keep snagging on specific phrases. Transfer in full. Bypassing all intermediate heirs. Effective upon 25th birthday of Seraphina Elaine Voss. Her 25th birthday was 2 years ago. She had spent it working. Her mother had sent a text with a cupcake emoji. She read the list. 2 rental properties on the east side of town, the ones her father mentioned managing at family dinners. The brokerage account that her grandfather had started when she was born and contributed to every year. The land parcel outside of town that Harlan had told her was tied up in legal proceedings. The lakeside home. And one final asset, the family house they were sitting in. The house they were sitting in. Seraphina, setting the document down slowly. This house is mine. Not a question. Lydia's hand went to her throat. This has to be challenged, she said. Mother, this is not legal. This cannot be legal. Winnie. It has already been reviewed, notarized, and registered. Rufus McGraw filed it 4 months ago. I gave your father every opportunity to come clean before this evening. He did not. There was no joy in this room. That was the thing nobody in a revenge story ever mentioned. The moment the truth comes out completely, it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like standing in a field after a storm. Everything is still. Everything is different. The ground is wet and the sky is clear and you are so tired and also finally free. Maybelle, crying now, voice small. So what happens to us? Seraphina looks at her sister for a long time. That depends on what happens next. Harlan has not spoken in several minutes. He is sitting with his hands flat on the table, looking at the space between them, and he looks older than Seraphina has ever seen him look. Not angry. Not defensive. Just old and tired and caught. Emmett, turning from the window finally. Harlan, you need to call Rufus tomorrow. And you need to be honest. Harlan nods barely. Emmett. All of it, Harlan. Not the version you can live with. All of it. Seraphina, standing slowly. I'm not pressing charges tonight. I'm not making decisions tonight. She folds the gold-bordered document carefully. But I am keeping this. Winnie reaches over and covers Seraphina's hand with hers. Warm. Dry. Steady. Your grandfather called you little bird, she says quietly. Do you know why? Seraphina shakes her head. Because birds don't ask permission to fly. They just wait until they're ready. And then they go. Seraphina's apartment is small. 1 bedroom, a kitchen with a window that lets in the morning light at a specific angle she has always appreciated. A second-hand couch that is genuinely comfortable despite its history. She has made this space hers completely. She sits at the kitchen table at 6 a.m. with the gold-bordered document, the bank statements, and a cup of tea. She does not feel the way she expected to feel. She feels clear. She opens her laptop and writes 3 emails. The first is to Rufus McGraw, requesting a full estate briefing. The second is to her bank, flagging the unauthorized access and requesting an account audit. The third is to the property management office of the 2 rental buildings she apparently owns, a brief, professional introduction. She sends all 3 before her tea goes cold. Rufus McGraw calls within the hour. He sounds like a man who has been waiting for this call for some time. Miss Voss, your grandmother told me you'd be in touch. I have everything prepared. Seraphina. How long has this been ready? Rufus. Since your 25th birthday. Winnie asked me to wait until she felt the time was right. And when did she decide the time was right? The day your father asked her to help him convince you to sell the lakeside property. That was 3 months ago. Which meant Winnie had been sitting on all of this, the documents, the statements, the deed, the estate papers for 3 months. Coming to Sunday dinners. Drinking her tea. Watching. Waiting. Not from cruelty. From certainty. She had wanted to give Harlan the chance to come clean on his own. He hadn't taken it. So she had taken the table. The bank calls at 10 a.m. The unauthorized account access triggers a formal review. Because Harlan had been transferring from Seraphina's accounts without a legal power of attorney, only a joint account she had opened with him at 19 and never closed, the matter becomes a formal investigation. Seraphina does not have to shout. She does not have to threaten. She simply tells the truth in order with documents. Lorena calls at noon. Maybelle cried all night, she says. I don't think she really knew. Seraphina. I know. Lorena. Clara is pretending she always thought something was wrong. A short pause. Of course she is, Seraphina says. She thought about Maybelle crying. She could have let that harden into something satisfying. Her sister, finally facing the weight of what their parents had done in her name. But she kept coming back to the image of Maybelle at 19, 2022, being handed things and told she was special and never once being handed the truth. That was a damage that looked like privilege from the outside. Inside it was a different kind of hollowing. She was not responsible for fixing that. But she did not have to enjoy it either. Harlan calls at 2 p.m. His voice has the texture of a man who has not slept. Seraphina, I need you to know that I am. I know, Dad. If you'll just let me explain I know. Call Rufus. Tell him everything. That's what I need from you right now. A long pause. Okay, he says. Okay. Late afternoon. Seraphina drives past the lakeside house on her way home from Rufus McGraw's office. She has never driven past it intentionally before. She pulls over on the gravel shoulder and looks at it from the road. It is beautiful. Old stone walls, a wide porch, oak trees at the border of the property. Her grandfather bought it when her father was a teenager. He had looked at it and thought of her. 22 years later, she was looking at it for the first time as its owner. She does not cry. She simply looks. Then she puts the car in drive and heads home. 3 weeks later, a Tuesday morning, Seraphina sits in the living room of the lakeside house for the first time. She brought two things: a thermos of tea and the photograph of her grandfather that used to sit on his desk. She sets it on the windowsill where the morning light hits it at the right angle. It is quiet in the way that places are quiet when they have been waiting for the right person. Rufus McGraw's review concluded. The forged signature triggered a formal bank investigation. Harlan voluntarily cooperated fully as Emmett asked him to. It would take months to resolve completely, but the cooperation mattered. Seraphina had made clear that criminal charges were not her goal. Accountability was. A repayment agreement was drawn up. The $31,000 would be returned in structured installments. The estate transfer was confirmed and registered. The joint account was closed. Winnie arrives on a Wednesday with a pot of soup and no fanfare. She looks around the lakeside house the way someone looks at a place they are relieved to finally see used correctly. Ephraim would have been very pleased, she says, setting the pot on the stove. Seraphina. Why did you wait until that dinner? You could have told me any time. Winnie without turning. Because if I told you quietly, they would have found a way to turn it into a private argument. I needed witnesses. She turned that over. Her grandmother had orchestrated the entire evening with the patience of someone who understood that truth, to be permanent, sometimes needed an audience. It wasn't cruelty. It was strategy. The most elegant kind, the kind that requires no lies, only timing. Seraphina. Did Grandpa really call me little bird? Winnie smiles. Sits down. From the time you were 4 years old. He said you were the only one in this family who watched everything and never made a sound until you were ready. And you both just waited? For 27 years. We waited for you to have the ground under your feet. Now you do. Lydia has not called. Seraphina does not expect her to, not yet, maybe not for a long time. That silence used to feel like punishment. Now it simply feels like distance, which is something she chose deliberately and without apology. Maybelle sent a text 2 weeks after the dinner. For words. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Seraphina had read it several times and then written back. I know. Take care of yourself. It was not forgiveness. It was not the end of the conversation. It was a door left open, not wide, just a crack, because she believed in the version of her sister that existed before the gifts made her lazy and the lies made her comfortable. Whether that version came back was Maybelle's work to do, not hers. Lorena stops by on a Saturday with coffee and zero pretense. Clara is telling everyone at her book club that she always knew something was wrong. She says, I know. She's also saying she was the one who encouraged you to stand up for yourself. Seraphina laughs. It is the first full laugh she has produced in weeks, and it surprises her with how easy it comes. Let her, she says. I don't need the credit. People ask, in the way people sometimes ask what revenge feels like. They imagine it loud. They imagine a moment. A table flipped, a door slammed, a speech that finally says every silenced thing. They imagine fire. Real revenge is quieter. It is sitting in a house your grandfather bought for you 22 years ago, and finally drinking tea in it. It is a bank account nobody can reach into without your knowledge. It is a document with your name on it, filed correctly, notarized, permanent. It is learning that the people who underestimated you did not break you. They just gave you very specific information about who they were. And you used that information well. It does not feel like fire. Feels like the morning after. Clean. Still. Ready. Winnie, before she leaves that Wednesday, pauses in the doorway and looks at Seraphina the way she used to look at her grandfather, with the specific pride of someone who has lived long enough to see the right outcome. What will you do with the rental properties, Seraphina? I'm going to keep them. Manage them properly. Rufus is helping me set up the right structure. Winnie nods, satisfied. And this house? Seraphina looks around the room. The light through the old windows. The oak trees visible from the porch. Her grandfather's photograph on the windowsill. I'm going to live in it, she says simply. It was always mine. She stands at the window a long time after Winnie leaves. The lake is gray-green and still. The oaks are beginning to lose their leaves. Early autumn. The sky that specific shade of blue that only shows up for a few weeks every year. She thinks about the 27 years before this moment. The double shifts. The borrowed chairs at family tables. The money that left her account in the night like something ashamed of itself. The Sunday dinners where she swallowed everything and drove home alone and told herself it was fine. It was not fine. But it is over. And she is still here. Standing in her house. Drinking her tea. Breathing clean air. Her grandfather called her little bird. She finally understood why. She had always been flying. She just hadn't known yet how far the sky went.